Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Celebrating Diversity in STEM dinner. It's sponsored by the College of Sciences Foundation and BASF. My name is Lewis Owen. I'm the Dean of the College of Sciences, and I'm glad to be joining you here this evening and the Diversity Symposium we'll have tomorrow. I'd like to sort of highlight the different STEM fields that we have related to diversity and how we can make those more accessible to all. Many of us here tonight, of course, are looking forward tomorrow to the Diversity in STEM Symposium. That event is also sponsored by BASF and organized by Dr. Jamila Simpson. Where is Jamila? She's hiding somewhere. Where's Jamila? Jamila is our Associate Dean for College Success and Wellbeing. This event originated almost a decade ago with a focus on women in STEM. And it was partnered with the Women in Science and Engineering program that many of you know as WISE. Our director of WISE is with us tonight, Dr. Catherine Titus-Becker. Where is she? She's hiding away. Right in front of me. There she is. Thank you. Today, this event focuses on all areas of diversity and mixes STEM students from across NC State with science leaders from BASF and our faculty, our alumni, supporters and friends. As many of you know, the College of Sciences is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. And this event is a cornerstone in that celebration, highlighting the diversity that we have in our college and the amount of time that we dedicate to making an inclusive environment for all. Tonight's event would not be possible without Dr. Ali Scott's support. Dr. Ali Scott is Vice President of Global Regulatory Affairs at BASF and a member of the College of Sciences Foundation Board of Directors. We can thank Dr. Scott. Dr. Scott's graciously advocated for this continued partnership between BASF and our College of Sciences. So thank you again, Dr. Scott, and all the representatives here tonight who are from BASF. Thank you. So if you're able to stand or raise your hand, can we just recognize everybody that's contributed tonight? Yeah, if you can stand and raise your hands just to thank everybody. Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome Dr. Scott to the podium to say a few words on behalf of BASF. Please welcome her. Thank you.
In the middle.
Thank you, Dean, for the welcome. And good afternoon and good evening to all of you. I am delighted to welcome you to today's annual dinner celebrating diversity in STEM at NC State, of course, sponsored by BASF. As we have done in the past, we're here not only to celebrate, but to support diversity in STEM careers. So I'm going to start with a little story. I left my home 30 years ago, my home country, because of what I felt was the lack of acceptance of women in agriculture, the lack of opportunities to have a truly innovative environment. And what I really wanted was to be at the forefront of change and leadership. Then I came to the States, and the first thing I did was change my name. Alejandra was way too long, too complicated, created concerning people on how to pronounce it and forget about how to spell it. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to spike interest on the people I talked to by who I was and not by having an exotic name. I did not know then that in that desire to fit in, years were going to change that into acceptance of who I really was, and eventually change into not only not wanting to fit in, but actually wanting to stand out. So I'm here today because I found an environment to challenge me, an environment to nurture me, and ultimately a family that ensured that I was challenged and allowed me to succeed both in my professional career and in my life. I found all that here at NC State, and later I found it at BASF. At times you want to explore, at times you want to feel safe. Sometimes you want to change the world and leave it better than the way that you found it. We challenge folks because we want to learn, we want to grow. Diversity enriches our lives. We live in societies because we long for people that are different to what we are. Let's see in each other, in our students, our colleagues, how being different makes us better. How diversity in schools and diversity in companies are really what fuels people to thrive. On behalf of BASF and all my colleagues here, I sincerely thank you for wishing and spending this evening with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scott. I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say thank you for sharing your inspiring story. My name is Tina Morrison, and I'm the Assistant Dean of Advancement for the College of Sciences. And before I introduce our distinguished speaker, I will let everyone know we will have time for Q&A following her presentation. We have two wonderful student volunteers, Victoria and AJ. There they are over there. And they're going to be, yes, we can clap for them too. So they will be on standby with microphones, and anybody who has a question, if you could just speak clearly into the microphone, that way the folks who are online and streaming can hear the questions as well. It is now my distinct honor to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Elena Brennan-Kupek. Elena is the Executive Director of Portfolio Strategy and Analytics at Gilead Sciences in Foster City, California. She leads the company's portfolio strategy for virology and inflammation therapeutic areas, helping teams work through complex decisions, life cycle planning, and optimal development strategy for its new therapies. Elena is also a tireless advocate for the transgender community. She is the founder and president of the nonprofit and nonpartisan Gender Research Advisory Council and Education, otherwise known as GRACE. She previously spent 7 years as the co-chair of the board of directors of the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund and has appeared in numerous news outlets. In May of last year, Elena was recognized as one of the top LGBTQ+ leaders in biopharma by Endpoints News. We are so fortunate to have her here today, but Elena is no stranger to NC State. She graduated cum laude from NC State in 1992 with a BS in political science. Upon her graduation, she served in the U.S. Navy as an intelligence officer in an FA-18 squadron. Elena was recognized as the 1994 Ground Officer of the Year and received 2 Navy Achievement Medals for her leadership. She and her spouse recently established the Elena and Kathleen Brennan Kupek Transgender Collection Endowment with the NC State University Libraries here on campus. So I encourage everybody to pick up a library membership so you can check it out. The collection provides reliable information and combats negative and harmful disinformation about transgender people. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Elena Brennan Kupek.
Thank you so much, Tina, and thank you, Dr. Owen and Dr. Scott. I'm reminded of when I first met Tina back in 2016, and yes, I have all my remarks down here somewhere, but seeing Tina, living here in North Carolina in 2016 when the famous bathroom bill passed, I've had lifetime seats for NC State football for years, even though I've not lived in Raleigh most of that time. But, the bathroom bill passed, and I called the Wolfpack Club, and I said, where am I supposed to go to the bathroom now when I go to football games? And Bobby Purcell was head of the Wolfpack Club at that time, and he said, well, just go to the women's room. And I said, that's the problem. You just passed a law that made it illegal for me to go to the women's room in this state. And my wife has a PhD in library and information science from the other school up the road. And she has a passion for learning and for libraries, although she's an information scientist. And she suggested the book collection and the endowment here. So I met Tina establishing that collection at the library, and so it's just wonderful to stay in touch after all these years. So, as Tina mentioned, I graduated here in 1992. It's hard to believe it's been 30 years. It was like literally a lifetime ago, right? I didn't look anything like this back then, I can assure you. I do remember one of the courses I took was on public speaking. And I have 3 adult sons now, and I encourage them to take a public speaking course. And I did that because I was scared of public speaking. Little did I know I'd be standing here 30 years later and delivering this speech to all of you. The topic of my talk back then was on radars, really edge of your seat, Doppler effect, So I hope that I can keep you maybe more interested than I did my fellow classmates back at the public speaking course. I think that what I hope to do tonight is share some of my experiences that may be relevant to all of us in the room and talk a little bit about the current state of affairs and really the world that we live in now, where many of us may feel under attack for being diverse. And so hopefully my remarks will be pertinent and relative and not too long and too boring. Tina made mention that, I was an intelligence officer at the Navy. In the Navy, I was so good at keeping secrets about who I was that I decided to make that a profession, right? Trust me, with the top secret and above things, I can compartmentalize really well and not share them. For the longest time in my life, I was scared to admit to myself who I was. And because I publicly transitioned 12 years ago. Or I guess 11 years ago, started the process physically before that. But I've really started living my life in the last 11 or 12 years and seeing the world completely different than I saw it presenting as a white male. And so I have this perspective that I think is helpful because I now operate in a world that treats me very differently than it did before. And I can see things that I didn't see before that are starkly obvious that through no malintent just weren't readily apparent to me. And so I hope that by being able to share some of my experiences that it may help you all as well. And I'm going to talk about 3 things: purpose, integrity, and compassion. Pick, which I've got a 20-year-old son, a 23 and a 25. They're always taking pictures, so I thought pick, maybe it resonates with the students here. But, I think that for me, living authentically, if you look at where I was, white class or white middle.
Oh,
That's not me.
No, because I gotta do. I'm doing the workshop, so I gotta be moving around a little bit. I'll be recording and stuff. So I'm with pants.
Pants?
You stand up here so you don't think that's it.
Leggings. I'm wearing leggings.
Trying to see the kilt.
A kilt.
Oh, it's the other room next to you.
Probably.
If I talk, does it drown out with the background noise?
Yeah.
No.
And so we wore kilts. I was in marching.
Wait, where was this at? In North Carolina?
Oh, maybe that got it. No? I think it's gone now. I think that's it.
Okay.
Whoa.
Well, maybe not. This is also why you would never wear a lavalier mic, so you don't go to the restroom and forget to turn it off, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm not hearing it now, so. But let's go back in time a little bit. It's 2011. I'm living this life as a middle-aged, literally 43-year-old white man with 3 kids, wife, living what's perceived as the perfect life. And I dated my wife through 3 years of college, got married, had children, was in the Navy, spent, at that time, a career at Pfizer, played high school football, baseball, played rugby my freshman year here, ROTC. That person was scared to live, honestly. And imagine I think the shock for everyone around me when I came out to them. My poor father, you know, really wasn't a white middle-aged man. You know, I was a middle-aged lesbian who happened to be transgender, just a little bit different. Especially, you know, I'm also been raised Catholic, and I'll talk about that. When I came out to my priest said, "I think it's okay as long as you're attracted to men." And I said, "Well, Father, we're going to have a problem." So, and my
I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
Ooh, let me. I was like, "Ooh, these mics are powerful."
No, it's fine. But, you know, my poor dad, who I love dearly, it took him like a year to get used to the fact that, you know, he had a straight son, and now he had a lesbian daughter, and then my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, he could never figure out, like, well, who is she attracted to? Who has she been with in the past? And I'm like, it's really simple, Dad. But the one thing I'm always grateful for, and I think there's some parents of children who are transgender here, is that my parents have always shown me unconditional love and support. From the day that I came out to them, and I fully expected to lose my relationship with my parents. I will always remember standing at the kitchen table with them and getting the biggest bear hug from both of them with tears pouring down their cheeks with all of us. And I think that that's what's so important for all of us, is that hopefully you find, no matter what your circumstance in life, that you're surrounded by unconditional love and support from your family. I think that the other thing, too, I want to quickly speak to is, you know, standing here before you, I'm so grateful for the foundation that I have here at NC State. I think you're at an amazing institution, one that has grown tremendously since I was been here. And I look back to when I was thinking about becoming a student here. I had a 2.75 GPA my first 3 years of high school. My parents didn't go to college. I had no construct of what higher education looked like. I talked to some of my friends, and I'm like, they're talking about what they're doing after high school, and they're going to college. I thought, oh, I guess maybe I should think about doing that. So I studied my senior year and got a 4.0, taking AP classes, and I'm like, okay, I guess I can do this if I study. But I really mean it when I say I literally squeaked into NC State. And I come from a family that my mother grew up in Bertie County in eastern North Carolina. Anybody from Bertie County? Or know where it is anyway? That's a couple hands. She grew up on a farm, 11 brothers and sisters. My father grew up in Illinois. My father has been a salesman his whole life, and so I had no framework for like what this institution had to offer me. And I'm always forever grateful for the foundation that I developed here. So my parents couldn't afford to pay for my college, so I joined ROTC to pay for my tuition and my books. I became a resident advisor to pay for my room and my board. And that's how I managed to get through college. And so I think that I can empathize with probably many of you in this room that understand what it's like to really have to work so hard for everything that you get, and that sometimes people may see you as one thing but not understand the struggle that you've had to go through to get to where you are. And as it was mentioned before, I went to ROTC here, and after I got commissioned, I was stationed down in Pensacola, Florida for the first 6 months. And when I was here at ROTC, I was the battalion commander, which is like the midshipman who's in charge of the whole unit of 80 or 90 people. And I was stationed down there on the beach in Florida. It was a tough job. Somebody had to do it. I did it, went to classes, played in the waves, and then I had to do all the ground school training for an F-14 navigator, which for those of you who don't know what that is, if you know who Goose is in Top Gun, that's what Goose was. So I got to do all the ground school, but none of the flying. So, but it was an amazing experience, and just keeping those ties to NC State early in my career. My friend Eric Cranford, who was the executive officer of the battalion, we were stationed down there together and friends and did a lot together playing golf. So while I was going through academic training, his job before he started pilot training was to be a model at the Naval Aviation Museum. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm studying my butt off every day. Eric is basically posing for a bronze statue to be made of him. Like, something is not right. But, you never know what you're going to do in the Navy. Who knew you could be a model in the Navy, right? But I learned so much in the Navy that stayed with me to this day. And some of that is probably the most important thing I learned is that it's not how to lead. It's what leadership is really about. Leadership is not telling people what to do and then following your orders. It's about building trust and respect with those around you and having empathy and compassion and hopefully working with people and empowering them to do great things because they want to do it for you and because they want to be part of an organization. And so that sense of purpose is something that has always stayed with me. I think the sense of purpose is just critically important. And it hit home for me 3 months after getting to my squadron in 1993. We were on a detachment out in the Nevada desert, Fallon, Nevada, about an hour and a half east of Reno. And we had pilots that were training, and there was a mountain range, and they were coming down a valley, and they're supposed to pop up over the mountain and do what they called a high hornet pop, and then dive down and drop their bombs in egress. The problem is, there was 2 mountain ranges, and the mountain range here and here. They were on this side of the mountain range. They came over, popped, down, dove, dropped their bombs. As they dropped their bombs, they realized there's another mountain right in front of them. And the lead plane, Dash 1, didn't have time, tried to pull up, wasn't able to pull up in time, and buried his jet into the mountain, and all the debris went 1,000 feet up the mountain. Dash 2 probably escaped within feet of his life. And so there I was, 23 years old, leading 20 sailors, picking up every piece of an F-18 off the side of a mountain in the middle of August, and realizing that, me telling people what to do wasn't going to be effective. And so I think that, it was my first lesson really in leadership and how to apply it was doing those things. And I think that I will always remember sitting there watching the sunset that evening and literally hearing taps play and watching the sun go down and thinking about just how sometimes we don't know what's ahead of us in life. We don't know what the next day holds for us, and that having purpose in what we do is critically important. And it became reiterated in September of 2001 when I looked at the list of people who were killed in the Pentagon. And sadly, my friend Eric Cranford, who's my executive officer, was killed at the Pentagon on 9/11. And so life is fragile, and we have an opportunity to make an impact in what we do with our lives, never knowing what the next day is going to hold. And, I like to think that both Leo was his call sign, Ted Farnsworth, who was an All-American tennis player at Princeton, the pilot that died, and Eric's death. They died, but they died pursuing the ideals of our country, which is liberty and justice for all, not just for some, but for all of us. All of us have something to offer. And I think that today, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like in many ways, many of us are under attack. And we're dealing with feelings that we probably are really challenging, and sometimes we can feel like we're alone. And that's one of the reasons last year I started the nonprofit that Tina mentioned, is I did so because of a sense of purpose and wanting to hopefully make an impact for those around me and make the world a better place. Because I have so much more. When you see somebody like me who's transgender standing in front of you, I am the 0.01% of the community. Most people who are transgender go to bed every night. I won't say most. Too many people who are transgender go to bed every night not knowing where they're going to get their meal tomorrow, wondering about the roof over their head, basically not having access to medical care, to proper legal documentation so they can get employment to feed their families. Many have to turn to sex work because that's the only thing that they can do. And so I have an opportunity to hopefully try and make the world a better place for those people that are coming after me. And that's why I couldn't stand by in 2016 when the bathroom bill was passed. Because I felt like, I was fortunate. I have a lot that's been, I think, fortunate in my life that I don't take for granted. And I made a decision that day that there's people who are coming after me. I didn't want to have people transition in their 40s like I did. I wanted the people to have access to gender-affirming care, to psychotherapy, that I would be extinct, a dinosaur. And we've made so much progress in that time. Now we have a gender clinic at Duke. We have a gender clinic at UNC. But with that has come challenges, right? I probably don't have to tell you about that. But it was during that time that, for the first time in my life, I understood what diversity meant. We had the rally at the Capitol for HB2. And I will always remember, like it was yesterday, standing there at that rally, looking around at the people, many of the faces and what's represented here in this room, and thinking, these people are here to support me and my community. They don't have to be here. But they recognize that what oppression looks like, what marginalization looks like, what othering looks like, what discrimination looks like. And they're standing up to support me and those like me. And the beauty and the overwhelming emotional impact that had on me is just so hard to describe. And I think that what we started to see in 2016, just to help ground people and sort of how do we get to this place in 2016 and even more so where we are now? To understand that, I think we have to understand the conflux of events that have put us where we are. We've all known for quite some time about the shrinking white majority in this country. 2008, President Barack Obama was elected. We had a black president for the first time in back-to-back terms. People, I think, who have felt more free to be vocal and who they've shown themselves to be in the last 7 years were now given an outlet after that to show themselves in some ways. But we also had the respect of marriage, or we had the Supreme Court overturn the respect for, affirmed the right to marry for people of same sex. So my wife and I got married in 2015, right? The problem is that you have a lot of people, unfortunately, in my community who are against my community and maybe against your community, that wake up every day actively working against us and our existence. And it's hard to really comprehend that for us to put our hands around that. That is people's business model, is literally hate. But that's what we saw. That's where these bathroom bills came from. Same-sex marriage was legal now. What are they going to do? They're going to pick on the weakest community and try and go after us because their jobs, their funding depended on that. That was their livelihood, right? So there's one more catalyst that I think has brought us to where we are, and that's the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And you take a look at all of those events, most recently Roe versus Wade, and the Republican Party had to do something to distract from that issue. So coming after the transgender community with all they can bear right now is what they've done. It's a distraction issue. Look over here, gender-affirming care for children. Surgeries to children who are transgender flat out do not happen. If a doctor does that, they're committing malpractice, and they should be dealt with for committing a crime. That is a falsehood. But that's what there's groups that spend $200 million a year propagating that myth and trying to create a world that tailors to their Christian extremism. And that's not all Republicans. But when people say this is a conservative issue, this is not a conservative issue. This is an issue of people trying to basically solidify and harden their place in society and grasping at their last gasps of the power they've historically had. So it's only gotten worse. Last year, 23 states passed bans on gender-affirming care. In Florida, where I live, I can't use the bathroom again, supposedly. I'm supposed to basically use a men's room in Florida in a government-owned building, right? Last week in Florida, when I go to renew my driver's license, I'm supposed to sign an affidavit and revert my driver's license gender back to assigned at birth. Basically publicly outing transgender people. Government mandating how I should live my life. And I think that you may think, well, that's the transgender community, they're so small. How does that affect me? Where does that come from? And I think it's important for context, historical context. And 1933, if we go back and look at 1933 in Germany, May 6th, on that day, May 6th of 1933, Nazi-supporting youths occupied the Institute of Sexology in Berlin. It was the world's is the expert on gender and sexual orientation studies in the world. They occupied it for 4 days, and after 4 days, they took 20,000 books into Bepplatz Square and burned them. And we lost all the research and the records that had to do with early gender-affirming care. And one of the texts that was burned that night was Heinrich Heinz Almansor, which he noted in his book, and I quote, "Where they burn books, in the end they will burn bodies too." It started with the transgender community at that time, and then we know where it progressed to. The marginalization of the transgender community is a symptom of a larger problem, but it affects every one of us in this room. And that's why it's so critically important that all of us, just like in 2016, that we're there for each other, that we stand for each other, that we're strong for each other. And that each of us, if you attack one of us, you attack all of us. And that's what allyship means. Allyship isn't putting things on your Facebook page or your LinkedIn page. It's showing up when communities are in need and in crisis. All of us has a right to live and exist in this country, whether you're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, bi, gay, straight, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, bi, whatever. We should all embrace diversity because that's what makes this world special. What each of us brings to the table, diversity of thought and experiences, makes us a stronger workforce. Companies recognize that. My company recognizes that. Obviously, BASF recognizes that, is committed to that. And don't let this political opportunism that we're experiencing scare you away from being who it is that you are. You know, I think for me, I want to pivot a little bit to the topic of integrity. For me, I struggled to accept who I was, but I always remember the day that after researching things and finally coming to the conclusion of I'm not broken. There's actually a medical condition that I have. There's science to back this up. There's peer-reviewed, studies that look at the topic. And I had to ask myself, how do I want to live my life? And the reality is, do I live my life with integrity, or do I choose not to live my life at all? In my community, almost half of people who are transgender attempt suicide. And many of those people are successful for the reasons that I stated earlier about the ostracization and all the things that go with that. And for me, I never wanted to disappear from this earth without my children knowing who I really was and knowing everything about who I really was, and being proud of who I am and having them proud of who I am. And that's living a life of integrity for me became really important. I'm happy to say that all three of my sons are grown men now. It's hard to say that. They're 25, 23, and 20. One's a consultant for Deloitte. Sadly, he's an engineer who went to Clemson. The middle one, accounting and finance major, went to Clemson. The youngest one didn't go to Clemson. He's a welder, though, and he's making more than the middle son who went to Clemson. Shh, don't tell him that, though. But one of the things that will always stay with me is when I was talking with my oldest son a few years ago, and he said he had two heroes in this world. One was Elon Musk. This was pre-crazy Elon Musk. And one was me. And I can't tell you what that meant to me, knowing how I struggled, and for the fear of losing everything in my life, my relationship with my children. But it gives me faith and confidence that if we live our lives with integrity, everything is going to be okay. The last thing I want to talk about is the C, for compassion, which is ironically the word of my intention for 2024. Because right now we're in a place in our country where I think we really lack empathy and compassion. We have the left yelling at the right, we have the right yelling at the left, right? It's just become a shouting match. 80% of us are in the middle, right? But we can't get there unless we stop shouting at each other and we engage in dialogue. And we start to realize who benefits from that bickering. It's the media. It's not us. It's not our mental health and our sanity, right? And that the better way that we can handle this is where we have compassion for one another. We open ourselves up to learning and understanding people who don't look like us, worship like us, have not come from the same backgrounds, and understanding the value that each of us brings to the table. We can't be scared of what we don't know. We have to embrace what we don't know. And nothing taught me more than that than being here at NC State, the opportunity to learn and to grow so much while I was here. And we can't hide in ignorance for fear of what that may bring. And we have to get ourselves outside of that comfort zone. And one of the analogies that I make is, listen, I am not an astrophysicist, but I believe that black holes exist, right? And it's okay. You may not understand people who aren't like you. You may not understand me being transgender, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a right to exist. We can't let ignorance pervade. We have to try and educate people. And I think that's critically important, is having that compassion and a willingness to learn and talk and inform folks. And that hopefully will create a better world for all of us. And that's really why I created the nonprofit I did. You know, we're making an impact. Yesterday we had an article published in the USA Today, which featured one of our board members, Lana Moore, a retired fire captain in Columbus Fire Department. Ironically, they just passed a horrible bill in Ohio that is basically restricting her ability to live as a transgender person. She served in a firehouse that served the legislators in the state of Ohio. She's in the Columbus Hall of Fame. And yet, that's how we're treating people who are transgenders, removing their right to live. I think that it's just important for us to have a world that we live in and to acknowledge that there is bias in this world. We can't be immune to that and think we don't have that. We have to focus on where we can make a difference and not cower and not be afraid to live our lives authentically as who we are and being proud of who we are. In these troubling times right now, I think that it can be difficult. It can be very difficult to be anything other than, I think, straight and white and in a very, very Christian extremism position right now. But you know who you are, and you know where you've come from, and always be proud of that. Always stand firm in that. Don't let the political winds that might be blowing over us right now deter you from taking pride in who you are and standing up for yourself and supporting your others and getting the help that you need. Keep that faith that this time will pass. Do what you have to do to protect yourself in the meantime, right? I think that, every day there's an opportunity for us to educate and inform people around us. And it's a fight or flight reflex, I think. Yesterday, I had to get my hair colored, so I was at the stylist. Believe it or not, I'm not naturally blonde. But I was talking with my hairstylist about my children. I showed her a picture of my children. And she looked at them. She said, "Oh, who's their father?" And I paused. I'm like, I said, it's complicated. And there's part of me that wanted to say, I am. And watch her head spin, right? And like, does not compute, does not compute. But I live in Florida. And we have to pick and choose our battles. Where are those opportunities that we can make a difference and live to fight another day sometimes? So practice that self-care. Do what you have to do to survive when you have to do it. But don't feel like you're ever alone in doing so. Rely on those that are around you. I think that every one of us in this room has something in common, some tie to this amazing institution. I am so grateful that my roots were planted firmly here, starting in 1987, where we can learn, we can explore, we can pursue knowledge and better ourselves. Take advantage of all those things. Take advantage of the people around you. These are relationships that you will have for the rest of your life. And I hope that if you live your life with some sense of purpose and integrity and compassion, that those things will keep you strong through whatever challenges that you may face and hopefully make the world a better place at the same time. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much. I forgot about the Q&A. I'm so sorry. I didn't come back up to get the standing ovation, I promise. I'm actually an introvert, believe it or not. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to take any questions. And you can ask me anything. There's an answer to one question that only my wife and my doctor know, but everything else I'll answer. Don't be shy. My goal is to help people, and there's not a dumb question that you can ask me. Really, I've probably been asked it before. Dr. Scott had a question I saw. Oh.
All right, I have a question. You said that you noticed some things that you didn't notice before, but we didn't get those examples, so
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that.
So I'll give you a story. I was working at Pfizer. I spent 23 years at Pfizer. I was leading a team. I worked for the same manager, leading the same team before I transitioned through my transition. I was the top performing manager in that group before and after. After I transitioned, the first performance review I had with my boss, I was told, you need to basically not be so confident in meetings all the time. You know, and how many women in this room have ever felt like you're supposed to shrink down and take a second seat within a meeting? Nothing changed about me except for how I look on the outside. Right? But if you're a woman and confident, that can be a threat to those around you. And I think that's something that I've experienced several times in my professional career since then. I've been told that at my current employer. I was told by a vice president that I should, speak less in meetings. In essence, he was telling me that because I knew more about the subject than people working for him did, and it was making him look bad. And I think that trying to advance my career was almost impossibly difficult after I transitioned. My career was going nothing like this. After I transitioned, it was like this and sideways and just trying to survive. And I would interview for jobs, and I wouldn't get them, and I tried to remain optimistic and go on to the next interview, go on to the next interview. And finally, people around me started saying, why aren't you getting these jobs? These other people are so less qualified than you. And one day I was interviewing to be the chief of staff to a C-suite executive at Pfizer. And the executive said to me, I'm worried about how my staff might react to your history, your gender history. I'm worried about your safety traveling internationally. And I said, well, where does my gender history matter whatsoever? I have a passport, my wife and I travel internationally, right? But he said the quiet thing out loud, that had been happening to me, the things that many of you may wonder, like, is this really happening to me? I don't want to blame it on being discriminated against, but when somebody finally said it out loud, especially a C-suite executive, it was confirmatory. And I knew it was time for me to move my career somewhere else. And I think that, it's hard to, and I don't fault men for this. Men have, I was blind to this until after I transitioned. I was telling somebody the story today. I was in a meeting of Pfizer managers, 1,000 managers in a room. They had 30 speakers on stage that day. 25 were men, 5 were women. Of the 25 men, 5 were not white. When I went up to my 2 white leaders afterwards and mentioned that to them, they had no idea. And so I don't think that a lot of times it's intentional overlooking people. I think it's been the way things are. And we can't get upset, and it's how we approach that. I approach that with my leaders with an opportunity to learn and be better the next time, being solution-oriented. But I think that for a lot of women I've talked to, it's been validating to them to hear some of my experiences because, no, you're not crazy. These things happen. And, how do we make the world a better place? That's some of the things that I don't have all the answers for sure. I don't know if that helps. Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your life with us.
Yeah.
And in your message, I hear a lot of hope. And I would like if you could try to dig in your memory and try to remember what were the first signs that you saw that things could change for the better, that probably are the ones that fuel you to become more active on that.
Well, I'll always remember after the HB2 passed here in the state, making the drive down from Chapel Hill where we lived at the time, and thinking about, I'd been asked if I wanted to make remarks that evening, and I wasn't sure. But I can't remember the name of the church that was at here in Raleigh, but the Reverend William Barber spoke. He was on the phone that evening, and that was my first encounter with Reverend Barber. And you have a national treasure in Reverend Barber in this state. He is one of the most amazing people walking this earth. I would say he's your next MLK, but no, he's your Reverend Barber. He is unbelievable. But when we were at the legislature protesting for HB2, it was in that he was actually training us in small groups of what to do if we were arrested. And we had to wear a white armband. And that let the police know that we had been trained on the ways to treat us gently if we were arrested, that we weren't going to resist. But really it was that experience at that church that night and then at the rally and being surrounded by people who were putting themselves out there for me. That is just the most moving and powerful experience of my life. And ironically, I was talking to a reporter at the event that day, and he was asking, where do you think this comes from? And I talked about the fact that I think it came from some things that I spoke about shrinking white majorities and people holding on, and it went right over his head. And what have we seen in the last 7 years since then? Just more and more manifestation of that. But for me, it was the power of recognizing that none of us can do this alone. We need support of everyone out there, every ally. And I think that that's what's driven me to sacrifice my anonymity and to put myself out there publicly. And, I live in Florida. My neighbors, I don't think most of them don't know. I mean, there's no reason for them to know my gender history. But I don't feel safe being out there. But I think that hopefully, all of us can make this world a better place so we can thrive in and thrive for those that come after us. So, thanks. Any other questions? Oh, there's a...
Hi, I'm Amanda Cardoso. I'm in the Crop and Soil Sciences. I'm very happy to be here, and I would like to thank you for this brilliant talk and the discussion that we're having right now. My question is about affirmative actions in higher education. So we know that the Supreme Court last year ended affirmative actions in higher education, and I would like to see what is your opinion on how we could continue to attract and support diverse people from diverse backgrounds in academia without being unlawful.
Well, I think it's an issue. It's no doubt it's a challenge, right? And I think that having spent a long time in corporate world, we see this in the corporate world too. So I can draw upon that example. It's you never want somebody to be hired for what they are, right? None of us. It doesn't help any one of us if we're tokenized and admitted or hired for what we are. The challenge is how do we make sure that we're getting the equal opportunities to be recognized, right? I think that's where, when it comes, I think it's gonna make it very difficult for the admissions offices. And I think diversity remains critically important in higher education. How they get to that might be different. I don't think it's gonna erode the merits of diversity, but I think it's going to make it different ways that you have to come to appreciate that diversity to make sure that you have people from different backgrounds, different thoughts, everybody, one of us brings a different piece to the puzzle, and that will always be important. And I think that the challenge is in educating people about the value of diversity in and of itself, because people tend to hire in their likeness. Right? It's a human bias that people have. We have to be conscious of the biases that we have. We have to uncover those unconscious biases. And if we can recognize those weaknesses in the system and hopefully address them, whether it's admissions or in hiring those around us, that's the first step. But it takes rigor and it takes institutionalizing processes and making sure that we have slates that are diverse in our hiring practices or admissions processes, and making sure that those people are showing up so we get the best and the brightest, and that any one of us that walks in the door and gets a job or gets admitted is because we're the best student who also happens to be X. We exist, but oftentimes we've been overlooked. And so how do we get noticed? That's the key. And so how do we stand up in those places? How do we shine and get the opportunities to be a part of the discussion? I don't know if that helps.
Hi, over here.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for your speech. I was wondering if you could speak also to kind of the empowerment and how your gender history and womanhood may have become an asset for you in addition to the source of some struggle, and how those things can coexist for everyone.
I think for me, I was very careful early in my transition to focus on my inner growth. I lived and operated in the world for 40-something years as a white male, never as a female. And there's a lot of people in my situation who are transgender, especially transgender women, who have been socialized and and for me, it's how do I acknowledge women and then the struggles that they've been through. I can't speak for them. I can try and learn and understand and have a better appreciation. I call my wife my angel because she is an angel. When I made the decision to transition, I did so fully expecting to live the rest of my life alone because I thought I couldn't hardly accept myself to get to where I was. Who would ever accept me? I met my wife literally the first month into my physical transition. And we dated for 1.5 years and been married for the last 8 years. But for me, it's having respect of the space that I was in and not trying to, I think, invade that space and make myself available to learn. And I think that's a mistake that some people in my community make. I see it all the time. There's this need they feel to change the world and that all visibility is good visibility, Caitlyn Jenner. And I don't think that's always the case. And I think it's doing the work and understanding and being respectful and trying to learn about the experiences. Talking about going back to stories. I remember the first time going to dinner with some of my friends that I grew up with in high school who were women, and the things they talked about at dinner, like the intimacy of conversations between women on a scale of 1 to 10 is like a 9. Like everything's out there, right? And I go back and I think about my relationships with my male friends, and I talk to those male friends now. How's the weather? How's sports? How's your kids? It's recognizing those differences and trying to appreciate those differences. And I think for me, it's just not being presumptuous about where my place is and being grateful that I've been accepted within that community. But they've accepted me. It kind of goes back to the leadership. I've earned that trust and respect by them. It's nothing that was given to me. And I just think, it's just how I think it helps me approach the world. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Yeah.
Thank you again for your time and sharing everything.
Yeah.
I was just curious about any programs you would have liked to see while you were a student that would have made the community more welcoming and accepting.
Well, we didn't even have I don't know what they call it now. Last I knew it was a GLBT center. I don't know if it's still called that or if it's something different. There was no support on campus back when I was here. I remember I loved Tracy Chapman, Melissa Etheridge. No coincidence that they're both lesbians, right? I remember looking for any signs of LGBT people on campus, looking for any hint that somebody might be out there that I could talk to and try and understand, and not seeing those. And so I think that, my perception of NC State is, again, my wife having got her PhD at UNC, is that our campus probably tends to be more conservative than maybe a UNC, and that it may not be as easy to be visibly diverse on this campus versus other places. There's an opportunity to not hold ourselves back. And if that is the case, how do we create those safe places for people to be visible with each other and to find people who are like them, and not to have to lurk in the shadows hoping that somebody is going to somehow give you a signal. And I think that, whatever those opportunities are to create that sense of community, whether it's groups. I was going to mention, I was touring the Centennial Campus Library today, the Hunt Library, and they have a new gaming center over there. And they were talking about the fact that they created this gaming center because they found out that a lot of the engineering students who lived on campus over there were not really getting out and doing things with each other. They'd be gaming all the time. So it gave them a place that they could go and create that community and, again, find that likeness. I will also say, Dean Owens, that the new dean of the engineering school is to be doing a gaming contest with the engineering students over there. So it's a library that's available to the STEM students and maybe a challenge for the dean of the STEM gaming. I'm just throwing that out there. But it was to create that sense of community where you might find people who are like yourself. Instead of feeling like you can feel so alone when you come to a campus of this size, if you've come from a small town and you haven't seen people like you. And so how can we create those opportunities for people to see people like them, be around people like them, and find that kindred spirit and that bond that will help them grow and thrive? So, hope that helps.
Hi, I just wanted to say that as a transgender person who is a student currently, I really appreciate you talking about your experiences in work and throughout your transition and all that. I wanted to ask if you talked about a bit about the social difference between you going through society before and after your transition. I was wondering if you had any experiences where between moving jobs after your transition or moving to different places and interacting with different people, you've ever encountered any difficulty with people regarding your gender history and how you dealt with that.
I very much did. The first year that I spent at my current company, Gilead Sciences, after the experiences that I had at my previous company, I was conscious that, and I am still conscious to this day about how I show up to do my job every day versus what I do advocacy outside of job. My company doesn't pay me to be an advocate for the community. They pay me to show up and do my job and be a top performer. And we always have to remember that. That's what defines us in the workplace, is how you show up and do the job. And I wasn't out about my background at my company because I didn't want that to be what defines me. And I think that people find some sort of cachet in knowing people's gender history. it becomes gossip that, I've got a secret. Did you know about that person? And I never want to be defined by my gender history. I'm a woman who happens to be transgender, not a transgender woman, and that's intentional. And I finally decided, I was asked to speak at a coming out day event in September of 2019. Or maybe it was 2018, 19. And I had a new VP at the time. And then that story was on our intranet page for the whole company. And after that became public, my new VP started treating me very differently and started basically canceling their meetings with me. A month later, I was called into their office and told that they were hiring somebody to do my job with my job description at a level higher than me that happened to be a white male. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's my job with my job description. I asked if I could interview for my job, and I was told no. And I'm like, wait a minute, And I'm thinking, the only thing that's changed is now they know my gender history. And the challenge is that when it comes to companies, they don't know how to deal with situations like that, right? Could you write that off to a lot of different things? Sure. But I had the highest rating the year before, and with the manager who just left. So it wasn't a performance issue, right? Was that discrimination? Without a doubt. For me, I had to make a decision. Do I leave the company and pick up and go somewhere else and start again and probably face the same thing? Or do I stay and try and make a difference where I am and fight through it? And I moved to a different role in a different department, and I've thrived. And I think it goes back to that fight or flight, right? And doing what we have to do to protect ourselves and be safe for ourselves, and trusting that what you're feeling, if you're getting that spidey sense, it's probably real. We know it. And it may not be something that can get validated from an HR department or things like that, but it's real. And so do what you have to do to protect yourself. And I think just always keep in mind that in the workplace, you're paid to do the job, to excel at that job. And I don't share what I do with my coworkers around me. They see maybe what I do on LinkedIn. But that's not how they should define my performance in the workplace. It's what kind of leader am I for them? What kind of results do I deliver for the company? That's how we're measured, and always just keep that perspective. Yeah.
Hi. I just want to echo what we've already said. It's really important that you're here. I want to thank you a lot for coming. Having this representation is really important and really impactful, and I cannot stress that enough. It's very few and far between, so thank you for coming. Sometimes with the amount of legislature and just general hate in the country, especially right now, it can be really emotionally daunting and cause a lot of complex feelings and emotions as transgender people. How do you find the courage to still be visible and still speak up and be authentically yourself while also maintaining your safety and your mental well-being?
That's a great question. I was asked by the reporter from USA Today last week, do I see any signs of hope out there? And after thinking about it, I said, no, I don't. And that was really crushing to come to that realization that in today's climate, I don't see a lot of things changing right away. And I choose to fight. And I choose to not let them win and to try and change their narrative and to humanize what it is. Like, let them see me, let them see you. We're not others, we're people that just want to do our jobs, that just want to show up and contribute to the workplace, to society, just like anybody else does. Nobody's race, gender identity, religious background defines them. But that's not what the animus comes from in these. We're in this environment, we're a political football. We're a distraction issue. And I think it's critically important to always have mental health care and to have a counselor. I have a counselor that I talk to every 2 to 3 weeks where I can share that vulnerability and be vulnerable. And I think some of my old socialization comes in that I'm just going to be me, and whatever happens, happens. not put myself intentionally in danger. I remember when I was out running one morning after I transitioned, I've been a lifelong runner, and I was out running, it was like 5:30 a.m., I was at a national meeting, and some women that I worked with said, "Was that you running this morning?" And I said, "Yeah." They're like, "Girl, you can't do that." Like, you may have been able to do that before, but you can't do that now, right? So some of that old socialization, comes through, and it's sort of like, I know where this comes from, and I'm not going to let them get the better of me. And it's hard. It's so hard. I have friends in Ohio right now who have lived a stealth life. Nobody around them knows they're transgender. And they're wondering, like, do we flee the state? It's hard for people outside of our community to really comprehend the level of depression and anxiety that any one of us feel in our community. Because it sounds like hyperbole when I talk about 1933 Germany, it sounds like hyperbole to make those comparisons. But I assure you, anybody who's transgender in this country right now is feeling what I'm feeling and maybe feeling what you're feeling. And to share that with those around you, don't keep that inside. Don't feel like that's something that you have to keep bottled up. I think it's critically important that you feel loved and surrounded and that you don't feel like you're in this alone. And so I think that's where I try and make sure that I'm staying in touch with my network of friends, and misery loves company in some ways. But I think that's important, to feel like it's okay that we can have that safe place to share how we really feel and not have to put a happy face on it for everyone.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a question. You had mentioned the need to create dialogues amongst different groups of people. And while we do have certain safe spaces for certain groups of people, what challenges do you see to overcoming what challenges to intersectionality do you see in your own experience?
I think creating the avenues and the opportunities for it, right? I think it's how do we create those places to have that dialogue? And I think that we're starting to see some resources be put towards that. There's actually some groups out there trying to foster dialogue, and but I think it's how do we seek those opportunities? Like this morning, I stopped by Senator Tillis's office downtown and dropped off information about the nonprofit and the background of transgender people. Like, how do we build bridges with people? How do we put ourselves out there? And in my case, it was offering to be a resource behind the scenes. Like, it's okay to ask questions and to come to turn to us. How do we create safe channels for people to ask questions and ask us what they might feel is a question they have, but they're scared to ask? And setting up, at the university, are there opportunities to use the shared spaces, the libraries, for example, to have meetings, and I think it's seek those people out who may be opposed to you and see if there's the opportunity for rational conversation. There may not be. And if there's not, don't press it, right? I think you don't want to go somewhere you're not welcome. But hopefully people, if they're intellectually honest, are willing to have the discussion and dialogue. And if you can get past the facade, that there can be some common ground that's met. But it's a challenge, right? Because some people don't care about, at their core, they are opposed to who we are and what we are. And recognizing that who are those people we can change and who are those people we are never going to change. So in our nonprofit work, we identify those people. We know that we're not going to change 10% of the people, no matter what we say or do. We can't waste our energy on those folks. How do we focus our time, resources, and mental energy on those that we can have a dialogue with, and just trying to create those opportunities to have that dialogue? So, not a real great answer, sorry. I don't want to keep you guys all night, so I don't know. Any more questions? It's okay. Great, thank you all.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the couple people who mumbled it over there. Appreciate you. Oh my goodness. All right, I see some alumni. I'm not going to cry. Whew. Sorry. I'm going off script for a second because I do see some alumni. So I'm a graduate of this college and of NC State. Oh, hi, my name is Jamila Simpson. I'm the Associate Dean for College Success and Wellbeing in the College of Sciences. And I came here at 17 years old. I'm from Western North Carolina. Yeah. And this place just felt so big, and I wasn't sure that anybody was going to care about me. And this place loved me beyond what I thought I could be. And I felt that all the love that I was given, it was my purpose to give that back to others. And this place has allowed me to do that. I've always felt supported, and I've felt supported by the students, by the faculty, by the staff. It is our honor to teach them. It is our honor to support them. It is our honor to build them up when they might not feel like they could be all the things that we know they could be. Elena, thank you for your beautiful talk. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. It is important here, especially at NC State, we are the wolf pack. We're not the lone wolves. We're the wolf pack. And we get through this journey together. It's important at an educational institution that we learn. I can only tell you my experience. You can tell me yours. And telling our journeys, it matters. It builds bridges. And it is important to not only practice self-care, but community care. And so, to my beautiful student over here, there is hope. You all are hope. Where's the hope? It's in this room. It's virtually. It's in a wonderful organization such as BASF, who values this so much that they are physically present and they put their resources behind their mission statement. To all the beautiful people in here, thank you for being present. Thank you for caring. I hope you will join us tomorrow for the symposium, because this is just a kickoff, okay? This is a kickoff. So if you're saying, I didn't register, that's okay, because in diversity and inclusion, you are included. So please stop by tomorrow. It will be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. here. We will have the breakfast in here, and then we will have sessions, and it will be focused on a community of care. Because again, care begins with each one of us, but each one of us together. Before leaving tonight, we encourage each table to think about and discuss today's wonderful talk and how you might use this information to take action in your own lives. Yes, so you may be thinking, well, I don't work here and I'm not an NC State student. I promise you there is applicability in your own lives. So please get to know the people at your table if you haven't already, and please discuss what action might look like for you. This dialogue has been so valuable, but it's only a starting point. We each play a role in moving toward a more just and compassionate society. So let's continue to expand our perspectives and work together toward positive change. I hope you all have a safe drive home. Hey to my alumni. And please enjoy one another. Thank you.